Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane's virtual service this morning. Great to have all of you with us, as always. I want to begin again by thanking Todd Milne for our music today. Todd, of course, is a professional musician, and he's gifted us with his own copyrighted material so that we have his full permission to play it and to enjoy it. So Todd, thanks again, buddy. Really appreciate it. Want to also welcome all of you to our congregation as we do each Sunday by reminding you of our mission to join together to create a nourishing, liberal religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world. Or as we say in short, and I know you're going to say it with me, to create community, find meaning, and work for justice. Welcome to one and all. Again, I want to embrace all that you bring with you this morning, all of your uniqueness, your unique beliefs and background and lifestyle and experiences, your unique differences, all that helps make you who you are is welcome here this morning. So thanks again for joining with us virtually. I know these remain difficult times. I think we're into about week 6 now of our isolating from one another. Lots of conversation going on around the country about when this is going to end, when it should end, how it should end, and so far no solid answers to any of that. So I hope that we will be able to move beyond this soon, and that we'll do so in a way that is wise and intelligent and not simply politically motivated. In the meantime, I appreciate your patience and your continuing to support each other and to reach out to each other and to make the best for others what is otherwise a really difficult situation. So letting one another know that we care and that we're here is important, and I thank all of you for doing your part to do that. I want to remind you of a couple of things this morning. One, we are still in the midst of our annual generosity campaign, and it's obviously a much more subtle activity than it usually is for us at this time of year. But last year we started sort of counting on your pledges to be continuing unless we hear otherwise from you, so we're going to be able to budget accordingly, presuming that you will continue your gifts unless we hear otherwise, that you're lowering them or adjusting them in some other way. So thank you all so much for your continued generosity at this difficult time. Speaking of which, we have another opportunity to help a very extraordinary group in our community that is also suffering the consequences of the coronavirus, and that is the Vanessa Behan Center, which I think a lot of you are aware of, is an organization that really helps provide daycare, sometimes night care, sometimes for a few days care for children who belong to parents who either need a break or simply don't have the ability to care for their children all of the time and need some help. And the Vanessa Behan Center is doing that in extraordinary ways. There's a huge demand that has arisen because of the coronavirus, where people are being laid off work, or one person has to work harder or more than they usually have. So there's lots of different circumstances out there for families, and the Vanessa Behan Center is being overwhelmed. So there's been an anonymous couple in our congregation who very generously offered to match up to $10,000 of money that is raised from the members of our congregation at this time. So if you're able to give to this really important need at this time, you can double your money in a hurry in this case. So let me just read what the center has said. Again, it's a center that works to prevent child abuse and neglect by providing a safe place for parents who are under stress or unavailable to bring their kids for a day, a night, or short stays. It says the support from UUCS members could not be more timely. Child care options are dwindling, and we fear that desperate parents may make unsafe choices. And with families sheltered in homes for extended periods, we're concerned about compounding stress that could potentially lead to abuse and neglect. Your support will help families and children today who need emergency care, crisis counseling, and hope that they'll be able to get through this pandemic. Thank you. This special fund driving opportunity will run through May, and you can give directly by going to the vanessabehan.org/UUCS match. So that's vanessabehan.org//UUCS match. And we will get that email address out to you in a church-wide email probably as soon as tomorrow. So, but again, I want to thank the anonymous couple for their great generosity, and I have no doubt it's going to be matched by the generosity of this entire congregation. So we have a real opportunity to help help a very important institution and many families in our community through this effort. So I wanted to really make a big deal of it because it's a big opportunity. Okay, with that in mind, that said, it is time for us to greet one another virtually, either through email or text or something like that. So I hope that you will, as always, say hello to those that you know and love. And if you don't know anyone yet, you don't have their text, and you don't have their phone number or their email address, I guess you have to say hi to someone you know and love. But in any case, reach out to some folks maybe you haven't done so, but you've been thinking of for a while. And we'll take a couple of minutes to do this morning, so have fun. Okay, thank you. And I do hope that after our service and throughout the week, if you were thinking of anyone you didn't have time to catch up with or want to catch up with for a bit longer, that you'll do so. Let's move forward now by reciting the words to our chalice lighting, the symbol of our faith, the symbol of our unity and our solidarity, of our openness and our inclusion, of our community and our individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world, and a beacon of hope to those in need, and may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt wherever it's been found. For our opening words, I'm going to read a reflection out of the back of our gray hymnal, written by a friend of our church, Kathleen McTeague. A lot of folks recognize Reverend McTeague's name. May the light around us guide our footsteps and hold us fast to the best and most righteous that we seek. May the darkness around us nurture our dreams and give us rest so that we may give ourselves to the work of our world. Let us seek to remember the wholeness of our lives, the weaving of light and shadow in this great and astonishing dance in which we move. All right, I think I'm going to move right into our children's story for all ages. And as always, I have brought a friend. And this will be, if I can get my act together, a familiar face. This is my friend Purple, who we have not seen for a while. So, Purple, it's great to see you again, and I understand that you were away traveling until you got the stay-home order because of the coronavirus. So, where did you go while you were around? Out of town, I should say.
Well, let's see. I went to visit my friend Peter in Netherlands.
Your friend Peter in Neverland, okay.
And my friend Alice in Wonderland.
Your friend Alice in Wonderland?
Yes, and my friend Yoda, who lives in a land far, far away.
Okay. Well, those are all just pretend places, you know, Purple.
Oh, yeah, and that reminds me, I also went to Washington, D.C.
Yeah, well, okay.
I'm sorry, I know I'm not supposed to talk about popsicle sticks in church.
You're not supposed to talk about popsicle sticks.
No, I'm not supposed to talk about popsicle sticks.
Well, why can't you talk about popsicle sticks?
You told me I'm not supposed to talk about popsicle sticks in church.
Oh, you mean politics?
That's what I said, popsicle sticks.
Okay. Anyway, it sounds like you went on a lot of places during your vacation, even if they were just imaginary.
Yeah, I wanted to see them all before the end of the world.
Before the end of the world? Well, Purple, I know things are pretty serious right now, but I'm pretty sure it's not the end of the world. What makes you think it's going to be the end of the world?
Oh, a little bird told me.
A little bird told you? What did the bird say?
The bird said, the sky is falling. The sky is falling.
Oh, okay. Let me ask you something. Did that little bird's name happen to be Chicken Little?
How did you know?
Purple, I've told you before that you really can't let Chicken Little worry you. You know, she always blows things way out of proportion.
Well, like the time she said she got chased by a shark while she was taking a bath?
Yeah, exactly.
And the time she said a spider tried to grab her while she was on the World Wide Web?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
But it wasn't just Chicken Little. Others told me the same thing.
Others told you the same thing? Well, like who?
Well, let's see. There was Henny Tenny.
Okay.
And Goosey Lucy.
Yeah.
And Turkey Lurkey.
Well, I can tell you that they're all just responding to a rumor that Chicken Little started in the first place.
What's a rumor?
Well, a rumor is when someone makes a whole lot of something out of just a little bit of nothing. And before long, it spreads throughout the entire community, and everyone gets up over something that was never much to begin with.
The Chicken Little said a piece of the sky fell and hit her on the head.
Yeah, I know for a fact that that was just a little acorn.
That's it?
Yeah, that's it.
Gosh, I feel silly. I'm not going to listen to Runers anymore.
Well, that's good, but I'll bet you still got a good time visiting all those places, didn't you?
I sure did, but there's one place I still can't wait to see.
Well, where's that?
Mount Molehill.
Mount Molehill? Where is Mount Molehill?
I don't know, but Chicken Little told me it's even bigger than Mount Everest.
Okay, Purple. Well, thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next time. I hope you make it to Mount Molehill soon. Ah, Purple. Always a delight to have with us. I'm going to go ahead and have you light your virtual candles or your physical candles, whatever it is you might have, as we have our Kindle candling ceremony this morning on behalf of those that we're most thinking of, who are most on our hearts and minds. And I know that we probably have a lot of folks that we're thinking of at this very difficult time. I have the candle over my shoulder on the Harold Belace artifact on the wall as a symbol of our candle lighting ceremony this morning. I did get a couple of specific requests. One, I'd like to light a candle for Art Harlow, who is recovering at home from a surgical procedure he had earlier this week. Please keep Art and Mary Giannini in your thoughts this morning as Art continues to heal from that. And also for Shelley McLellan, whose mother is battling cancer and became non-responsive this week and has been placed on comfort care. So please keep Shelley and her mom and her entire family in your thoughts at this time as well. And I know there's, again, lots of folks in our lives we're thinking of, folks who are beginning to suffer the economic difficulties around being kept up, as well as those we're worrying about who either are sick or may become sick from the coronavirus. So lots of folks on our minds, I know, so let's take a minute or more of silence on behalf of those that you're thinking of this morning. Those named aloud and those embraced in our silence, and all those who are suffering in our world at this hour, we hold in our community with compassion. I think we'll go ahead and just extend that mood of quiet that we're in right now with a moment of further meditation. So please get quiet and contemplate if you can. For our reading today, I'm going to read a rather lengthy, or at least lengthier than usual, excerpt from Mahatma Gandhi's autobiography. I'm going to be talking a little bit later about narcissistic wounds. And a narcissistic wound, which all of us suffer, does not mean that we're narcissists. It just means that we have love wounds. We have wounds that we experience anytime we're no longer fully allowed to express ourselves as a member of a community, at least not express ourselves authentically. And this is from a section, brief story of a narcissistic wound that Gandhi himself experienced as a young man when he was taking his first trip toward Bombay and then on to England from a chapter entitled Outcast. Meanwhile, my caste people were agitated over my going abroad. No one from my caste had been to England up to now, and if I dared to do so, I ought to be brought to the book. A general meeting of the caste was called, and I was summoned to appear before it. I went. How I suddenly managed to muster up the courage, I do not know. Nothing daunted and without the slightest hesitation, I came before the meeting. The Sheth, the head man of the community, who was distantly related to me and had been on very good terms with my father, thus accosted me. In the opinion of the caste, your proposal to go to England is not proper. Our religion forbids voyages abroad. We have also heard that it is not possible to live there without compromising our religion. One is obligated to eat and drink with Europeans. To which I replied, I do not think it is at all against our religion to go to England. I intend going there for further studies, and I have already solemnly promised to my mother to abstain from the 3 things you fear most. I am sure the vow will keep me safe. But we tell you, rejoined the Sheth, that it is not possible to keep our religion there. You know my relations with your father, and you ought to listen to my advice. I know those relations, said I, and you are an elder to me. But I am helpless in this matter. I cannot alter my resolve to go to England. My father's friend and advisor, who is a learned Brahmin, sees no objection to my going to England, and my mother and brother have also given me their permission. But you will disregard the orders of your caste? I am really helpless. I think the caste should not interfere in the matter. This incensed the Sheth. He swore at me. I sat unmoved. So the Sheth pronounced his order. This boy shall be treated as an outcast from today. Whoever helps him or goes to see him off at the deck shall be punishable with a fine of 1 rupee. Quite a story. Thanks again, Todd Milne, for that excellent piece of music. So my sermon today is entitled, Just Outside the City of Good People, Parable of the Remorseful Serial Killer. According to a Sufi parable, there once lived a man who had heartlessly murdered 99 people. He eventually grew remorseful and went to a renowned scholar to ask if it were possible for Allah to forgive him if he repented and reformed his ways. Unfortunately, this particular scholar, for all his knowledge, wasn't a very wise man and told the serial killer that he could not possibly be pardoned for such evil deeds. The murderer flew into a rage. In that case, I might as well kill you too. After doing so, feeling more remorseful than ever, he went to another learned religious scholar, explaining that he had now killed 100 people, and asked if it were possible for Allah to forgive him if he repented and changed. Being a truly wise man, the scholar replied, "Of course Allah will forgive you. You should repent at once." He then suggested that the man should avoid associating with wicked people because bad company naturally leads to bad behavior. The man broke down in tears and asked Allah's forgiveness. He then did as the wise man said by turning his back on bad company and setting out for the city of good people. Before continuing with this parable, I'd like to discuss some of its implications so far. Anyone immersed in Western culture knows of the key role that forgiveness plays in the Christian religion. According to its mythos, ever since the first man and woman disobeyed God, everyone is born contaminated with original sin. It's such a serious condition that it required a blood sacrifice of God's only Son to cleanse us all of our sin and sins. As the Apostle Paul wrote, "As all die in Adam, all will be made alive in Christ." The essence of this idea. The centrality of this doctrine is demonstrated by a conversation I had with a young woman at a coffee shop several years ago. She was a student at the Southern Baptist Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, and she told me that she had been saved from her sins when she was only 8 years old. I listened respectfully and didn't argue, but I couldn't help but wonder what terrible things a wonderful 8-year-old child could have committed that required a blood sacrifice before she could be forgiven. Even as a former Southern Baptist myself, this isn't a question I could ever reasonably answer. The deep sense of shame that many of us carry, however, isn't exclusive to any particular religion, although it may be an outgrowth of the strong foothold this doctrine of original sin continues to hold within our Western culture. Even non-believers among us tend to have an inherently negative view of human nature, which I suspect is embedded deeply in our culture and is therefore part of our enculturation. Humanism, both formal humanism with a capital H and informal Enlightenment humanism with a small h, portend to value human goodness and agency, which is quite a contrast to this idea that there's something fundamentally wrong with all of us. But even the more humanistic thinkers among us often tend toward a negative view of human nature, a view that seems automatic and paradigmatic within our thinking. In his book, Homecoming, John Bradshaw writes about the profound sense of shame that we inherit from our families, from our peers, from our schools, in addition to our churches. Parents who call their children stupid, silly, crazy, he says, and so on. Wound them with every word. You shouldn't feel what you feel. Your ideas are crazy. Your desires are stupid. You are continuously flawed and defective. Regarding shame at school, Bradshaw says, you are immediately judged and graded. You compete to be okay. Children stand at the blackboard being publicly shamed. Grading itself can be degrading or shaming. Hopefully that's not happening as much these days. Knowing a lot of teachers, and because I'm married to one, I don't think it is. But it is a dead-on description of my childhood education, and I was one of those dunces who froze before the ominous blackboard and was punished by having to stay after school if I didn't give the right answers, which I seldom did. Bradshaw recounts his own experiences at an elementary school in Texas where Mexican children were punished simply for using their own language. It's a very extreme example of narcissistically wounding somebody, preventing them from speaking, from saying what they say and how they say it in their own words, in their own language, in their own mind. As for our peers, he points out to the cultural obsession with perfect tens and of the ridicule that many an adolescent experiences in the high school locker room. And Bradshaw wrote his book long before social media made it even harder to get away with the chronic angst of peer pressure. And for kids who don't meet these expectations, he writes, they lived a daily nightmare just coming to school. The awkward kids, the ones who were non-athletic, also took a shaming at recess and during games. Growing up poor and unable to afford the latest fashions and technologies can also be a source of shame. Bradshaw writes, poeticizes this idea. I came upon you when you were magical. Before you could know I was there, I severed your soul. I pierced you to the core. I brought you feelings of being flawed and defective. I brought you feelings of distrust, ugliness, stupidity, doubt, worthlessness, inferiority, and unworthiness. I made you feel different. I told you there was something wrong with you. I soiled your God-likeness. My name is toxic shame. In contrast to this Western paradigm claiming, as Paul succinctly said, there is no one who is righteous, not even one. Our Sufi parable begins not with an 8-year-old whose worst sin is she probably forgot to make her bed in the morning, but with a grown man who has deliberately and heartlessly murdered 99 people. The story doesn't begin with the first human being to disobey God or with a little baby born in original sin, but with an adult who has repeatedly committed the most heinous of human evils. If it is possible for one such as this to be forgiven, then what do the rest of us have to worry about? What horrible things have we done in our lives that we should feel the kind of toxic shame Bradshaw describes? Of course, there are two opinions about whether or not this serial killer can be forgiven. The first scholar tells him he cannot be pardoned for his heinous crimes, and the second says that he can. The murderer responds to the first by saying, well, if I can't be forgiven, what's the point of changing? I might as well continue doing the worst. It's an important reminder of what a chronic sense of feeling ashamed, unworthy, and unlovable can do to a person, to a person's very ethics. Why even try if we believe it is impossible for us to be better or to do better, or to transcend what we have been taught is just a part of human nature? Those who feel unloved may behave in unloving ways. As one of my own college theology professors used to say, you will always treat others the way you think God treats you. In 2008, evolutionary psychologist Kevin Flannelly and his team of researchers verified this in a study examining how mental health corresponds to the beliefs that God is close and loving, approving and forgiving, or creating and judging. A meta-analysis of these studies, Flannelly says, suggests that feeling one has a positive relationship with God is associated with better psychological adjustment, whereas feeling one has a negative relationship with God is associated with poorer psychological adjustment. In brief, those beliefs in a close and loving God have fewer, those who believe, I should say, in a close and loving God have fewer psychological symptoms in general. Those with beliefs in an approving and loving God have less social anxiety, and those with beliefs in a God mostly as a creator and judge have more psychiatric symptoms. That's what the Sufi parable is getting at. That when the man believes he is unforgivable, he behaves unforgivably. As Alice Miller says in her book, The Drama of the Gifted Child, contempt for those who are smaller and weaker than us is the best defense against a breakthrough of one's own feelings of helplessness. Rather than dealing with the pain of being unloved, we cover it by tormenting others. But the serial killer breaks down in tears the very second the scholar tells him that he can be forgiven. That probably greatest of narcissistic wounds, Miller continues, not to have been loved just as one truly was, cannot heal without the work of mourning. So this violent man's tears are a positive sign that he has truly repented and is prepared to begin reforming his ways. But it's important to recognize that reformation comes after forgiveness, not before. The wiser of the two scholars doesn't say, you must first turn your back on your evil ways, then you will be forgiven. It's only after he says he's forgiven that the man heads for the city of good people to begin living a different kind of life. Remember what Jesus said to the woman about to be stoned to death after she was wrongly accused of adultery. After he brilliantly challenges the flash mob's puritanical and petty self-righteousness, he asks, where are your accusers? Is nobody left? Nobody, she says. Well, I'm not going to judge you either. Now go and sin no more. If one must change before they are forgiven, then it's not for forgiveness. Right? It's not giving anything before someone deserves it. That's the cart before the horse. The forgiveness part, the transformative unconditional love part, comes first in these stories. For if we're only loved after meeting the expectations of others, then we're not loved, not truly for who we are, and we end up with the kind of narcissistic wounds that Bradshaw and Miller are speaking of. Moving on with the parable. It so happens that while the man was on his new path in search of the city of good people, his appointed hour of death had arrived. But because he had lived such a wretched life and only received forgiveness at the last moment, both the angels of mercy and the angels of punishment came to claim his soul. The angels of mercy argued that because he had repented and was already on his way to the city of good people, his soul belonged to them. But the angels of punishment argued that because he had not yet reached the city, his soul belonged to them. So the archangel Gabriel was called upon to help settle the dispute. Gabriel instructed them to measure how far the spot where the man had died was from the two cities. If it was closer to the city of good people, his soul would belong to the angels of mercy. If it was closest to the city of bad people, wicked people, it belonged to the angels of punishment. Unfortunately, because the man had only just begun his journey, he was still much closer to the wicked people and had not yet had time to do anything good with his life, not one thing. It would seem the man's soul was doomed. But because Allah is merciful, Rahim, and unconditionally loved the man, he reached down and he lifted the spot where the man's body lay, and he placed it to just outside the city of good people so that his soul could be given to the angels of mercy. That's an amazing ending for so many reasons. Perhaps the least of which is Allah's miraculous power to change time and space. But its real point is very human, not miraculous, because it addresses the narcissistic wound of this man. And parabolically, those of all of us, those wounds, that is, of being unloved and unaccepted for who we truly are, even with all of our warts and faults. It is this feeling of being unloved, of not being truly loved for who we are, that causes us to feel separate, unworthy and unconditional divine love, and as social outsiders, too far beyond the city of good people for our lives to be of any worth. And all of us carry this narcissistic wound. All of us, no matter our color, our gender, our sexuality, our economic background, or the imagined place of perfect privilege projected onto some of us. As philosopher Lou Marinoff says, suffering is a unitary experience. And we suffer primarily because we are human. Suffering is a universal human experience that is fundamentally caused by the kind of narcissistic wounds I've been talking about, the experiences of not being loved and embraced for who we truly are, not being allowed to fully unfold without being made to feel ashamed of ourselves. Again, as Marinoff writes, the Tibetans are fond of saying that there are two kinds of misery, that of having and that of not having. Children who have families, no matter how loving, will be disturbed, abused, or traumatized by them. Children who have no families will be equally disturbed, abused, or traumatized in their absence, or else by their surrogates. Children whose parents are alcoholics or drug addicts will suffer potentially many ill effects of their parents' substance abuse. Yet children whose parents are perfectly normal will suffer potentially many ill effects of their parents' normalcy. Children born to poverty may suffer and strive to overcome its disadvantages. Children born to wealth may likewise suffer and strive to overcome its disadvantages. Children born in any race, class, or gender may suffer because of it. Anything in one's environment may become a link to this chain of suffering. So maybe we should be talking about original suffering rather than original sin. If the notion of sin, whether original sin or the personal sins committed by someone like this serial killer, is best defined as separation, as theologian Paul Tillich said, this parable reminds us that it's really a human invention, not something that can rightly be ascribed to our ideas of God. The serial killer kills because he believes he is separate, beyond forgiveness. The first scholar condemns him because he believes the man is separate, beyond redemption. The angels argue over his soul based on which community he is most separated from. But this isn't an argument Allah gives a second's thought to. There is no difference between the good and the bad. There is only love for all her children and the whole of her creation. As the Sufi poet Rumi said, out beyond all ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. What a welcome contrast to this idea of original sin that has penetrated the Western psyche and influenced our notions of humanity, even among non-believers who too often speak cynically of human nature. Somebody says does something unsavory, that's just human nature, we say. What do we expect? What else could we expect? That's human nature. In his book, Original Blessing, theologian Matthew Fox likewise reminds us the doctrine of original sin is but a human invention. Fall redemption theology has ignored the blessing that creation is because of its anthropomorphic preoccupation with sin. He says, the result has been, among other things, the loss of pleasure in spirituality, and with this loss, the increase of pain, of injustice, of sadomasochism, and of distrust. 14 billion years before there was any sin on earth, there was blessing. In fact, the idea of original sin is only a few hundred years old. It cannot rightly be attributed to God or to nature, but to a group of cynical church officials from the 16th century. By contrast to this notion that makes an 8-year-old girl believe she is so innately rotten that she needs to be forgiven and redeemed, our Sufi parable starts with a rampaging serial killer. That's the point of this story. That if even a man such as this belongs to the angels of mercy, even a man such as this deserves mercy, what do any of us have to worry about? What have any of us done that we can justify not forgiving one another, or welcoming one another into our company, or including each other into our communities? Perhaps we'd all do well, believers and non-believers, to let go of the hellish notions of both God and humanity that we've grown up with over the ages, to embrace this image of Ar-Rahim, God is merciful. But God, in my opinion, is only a projection of our highest aspirations. Theology only means something when we embody and incarnate the gods we claim to believe in. Walk towards this kind of God, Muhammad says, and God comes running towards you. Thank you. For our benediction, just play a little music. That's fine. I'll do the benediction after. Thank you, Todd. Our benediction is from Father Oscar Romero, who once said, "The original, pristine human vocation is goodness. We have all been born for goodness. No one is born with inclinations to kidnap. No one is born with inclinations to be a criminal. No one is born to be a torturer. No one is born to be a murderer. We have all been born to be good, to love one another, to understand one another." Peace, shalom, salam alaikum, amen.